Welcome back to episode 3 of Perfect Score. Myself and Nick today are going to take the next step in our kind of review journey that we're doing here and bridge into what'll be the kind of larger part of this series. We're going to take kind of each mastery, maybe not every mastery. We'll see if we get to that, but we'll go through mastery by mastery and just sort of go over like the core of what you would put into building each of those decks. Obviously, the like tech and stuff that you put in will change from person to person and meta to meta, whatever. But when you pick a mastery, there are just certain cards that you're going to use when you play it. And not everyone's played every style or is like familiar with all the cards, especially with the inclusion of some of the NZ stuff. There's just kind of a lot to consider when you're, even before you've started thinking about like the unique stuff your deck's going to do. There's just a lot of things to think of. I picked this mastery, these like 10 cards like auto include in the deck. And that's not counting, of course, any of the stuff from like episode 1 that we talked about with like the Power 7 or your champ drills or like, none of that kind of stuff, your time, any of those things that you would normally just have in a deck because you put the Power 7 in first. Obviously, you're still going to do that in 99.999% of times. This is like, what does this mastery give you? So we're going to start first here with the Blue Trunk Saga mastery. Now, this mastery has historically been real bad. To put it lightly, this has always been considered kind of the worst blue mastery, and by a lot of people, like the worst mastery. But as cards have come out through the NZ releases, we have supported blue a lot. And one of the things that have happened is there's been sort of attached cards that have been created to attach to the various quote-unquote bad masteries to make them better. This is one of those decks that has gotten one of those cards, and it has turned into quite an interesting deck. So just to go over the mastery quick, we are looking at the Cosmic Anthology release from Fusion Saga because it's the most recent printing of the mastery. Your opponent must reach 6 anger to advance personality level. All of your blue style attacks gain, if successful, raise or lower your opponent's anger 1 level. So they have to get to 6 to level, which is super good for slowing down anger decks in standard. But also, anytime that you would perform an attack that's successful, you can get them to raise anger, or you can control it down if you want to. So normally, the reason that this has been so bad, and one of the reasons blue historically in general has been so bad, is that lower your opponent's anger isn't a win con. Like that's not furthering your game in any meaningful capacity. It does slow down like an MPPV deck or something, but there are a ton of decks that just don't gain anger. So like against those matchups, this just does nothing, right? And so raising your opponent's anger, well, you could do that slowly too to sort of like push them over the edge off of like a Camp 1 deck. But even those, then you have to have successful attacks. And as anyone knows, playing against one of those stasis decks, you're not getting successful attacks off. And you're not going to be in combat long enough to do 6 of them, 6 attacks even, let alone successful ones, let alone blue successful ones. So, in thinking about what to make for the attached card, we really wanted to think about like how can we use like the game or like how the messing with your opponent's anger, how can we turn that into a strategy? So that led us to blue Power Throw. So this is a physical attack that does 5 stages of damage, has Empower 2 in case you already have one of these attached, but it attaches to your mastery, and while attached, your attacks deal plus X power stages of damage, where X is your opponent's anger level. When you play a blue style card that can lower your opponent's anger, you may raise their anger 1 instead. You may only have one of this attached. So, as you can already see, this combos into that mastery, where now all of your blue style attacks can raise or lower your opponent's anger 1. You can have them raise it instead. You can like play a blue card that lowers their anger because the blue cards just do that. So you can raise it 1, and then the attack is successful, and now you can use the mastery portion to say raise it again. And okay, cool. So now you can start like kind of pushing them up to 3, 4, 5 anger. And then this just makes all of your attacks, not just blue ones, but all of them, do plus X damage. So now it becomes this like tug of war game where you're kind of pushing them up and down from 3 to 4 to 5 to 3 to 4, back and forth, trying to keep them from leveling, but also trying to keep them at like a high enough damage or high enough anger so that all of your damage buffs are huge. And that's turned out to be really interesting to play. Naturally, plus X stages means that your deck is probably best suited to be a physical deck that's also already doing stages. So this is kind of like a blue physical core. So we'll get into some of that as we go. But the beauty of this deck, really, because of the damage output is awesome, but the control that you get over their anger from just your blue cards anyway, but also the mastery and the power throw, you have such a great matchup in standard where you can really mess with how fast MPPV decks can go, but you can also really start moving the needle on raising your opponent's anger too if they are a stasis deck, where before you had to have a successful attack to get their anger raised. Now it's just anytime you play a blue card that lowers their anger, which is most blue cards, you just get to raise it anyway. So now your attack doesn't have to be successful, and so it becomes a lot easier to control that aspect too. So you have this cool matchup into like stasis ball deck kind of thing, and you also have a good matchup into MPPV. So you just, in that case, have to fight off opposing beatdown decks, which takes us into who you should play. Nick, you want to tell us who you might play in a deck like this?
So when you're dealing with any kind of physical deck, there's a couple obvious choices. The most obvious is, of course, Majin Buu. Buu is an E, and being an E is awesome. So, that he makes perfect sense. But generally, anybody that is in a higher power bracket, D personalities especially, are going to be the ones you want to play in this deck. The other choices are the double attackers, Cell or Mariko, somebody like that. But just generic physical personalities is kind of where you want to be with this. You don't have to get super fancy, and there's a lot of choices you can have. So the range is pretty good for the MPs you can play. I mean, you don't want to be on, Nappa or random personality in B that doesn't really progress your game plan. But most higher power level guys are pretty good in this deck. And of course, like I said, the double attackers like Cell, it's pretty useful in this deck as well. So, moving on from that, we're going to talk about kind of the blue staples next. Of course, since this is mainly a physical deck and mainly a standard deck, like Derek mentioned, you're going to have your Majin Buu's Fury and your Gohan's Kick as well as your other staples. So, that's going to be part of your package. But since this is our first blue deck, we're going to go over kind of the blue staples. These are the blue cards you play in every deck. So we'll start with the Sensei deck only blue Mistkick. Obviously it's a physical attack, which is great. Discarding or basically two of your opponent's non-combats or allies is super strong. Kamehameha Blast, it's an energy attack, but you'll pretty much play it in every blue deck no matter what. Focused, it's great. A little bit of anger, lowering and raising, and then non-combat or ally hate. Betrayal, of course, another same thing. Physical attack, non-combat or ally hate. And then, of course, Blue Terra is just energy for 3, go get any card. So really strong. Those are kind of your core blue cards. You're going to play those in every blue deck. We're obviously going to play them in this deck. Feel great about it. Uh, so that's kind of like your starting point with the good blue cards. These in my opinion are blue cards that should be in your either deck and or Sensei deck of every single blue deck you build.
Yeah, whether you're energy, physical, whatever, all these go in all of them.
Yep.
So going into now, what else to do? Well, if you're doing a physical deck and you're in blue, especially, the sort of throw package that's been created has been super strong for that strategy. So it sort of stems from this first card, Majin Buu's Chokehold. Uh, this card's been around forever. You know what it does. Physical attack. Your opponent loses a stage at the start of each of their attack or attacks phase, and if it's successful, you get to go grab a throw card. So we have this little sort of throw package. You're going to run your obvious 3 copies of Blue Colossal Throw. This is one of those new cards we were talking about with discard by discarding another blue physical card, which you have a ton of. It does +3 damage, throws your opponent's anger 1, which now works, with your power throw, and then eventually your mastery 2. If successful, you get to search your deck for a card that isn't this card that is blue and put it in your hand. So it's kind of like Axe Heel Kick in red, but just blue, and for any blue card. It doesn't just have to be an attack. Then, like all transform cards, it gets RFG'd. You can also only transform one copy of this a turn, so you can't chain them out of your discard pile. But you can play a chokehold for +4 damage, then start draining your opponent's MP one stage every turn, and then fetch a Colossal Throw, which then will fetch another attack out of your discard pile, and you can start chaining these kind of throw physical chain combos together, which is great as you extend your turn and your opponent loses a stage every action. You also play 3 copies of Blue Round Throw. It's physical, doing +5, and then or stops a energy attack. So you get like a block, energy block out of it, or just a giant physical. It lowers your anger 1 just flat, which is great. You want that. Those are your like core throw cards. You're gonna have three chokeholds, or 4 if you're Boo. 3 colossal throws, 3 round throws, and then you're gonna run like 1 copy of blue round throw, or sorry, blue body drop throw, or like blue big whirl throw, or blue shoulder wheel, or blue shoulder throw. Yeah, throw. There's just a few of these like blocks from Saiyan Saga that have throw in the name. There's an energy one. There's 2 physical ones. Most of the time, you just kind of pick the physical one you want. The energy ones you don't need as often. You have your round throws already, which is just a guaranteed energy block if you need it to be. Otherwise, you're just a giant physical deck. So most of the time, like they're not going to have the stages to punch you with energies anyway. So that's kind of your built-in energy blocks. But having a fetchable physical block feels really good. You do also play 1 copy of, sometimes a little more, depending on your deck, or you'll sensei some of these in if it's really urgent. But just having 1 copy of this in your deck to be able to fetch off a chokehold feels awesome. It has transform too, so if it ends up in your discard pile, you can play it that way too. But it's an energy for 3, and then if successful, you can raise or lower your opponent's MP 1 personality level. You don't even have to worry about the anger. Notably, too, it just raises them. It doesn't like gain them 6 anger or anything like Winter Countryside would prevent. So they still level through that, and it doesn't reset their anger. So they like if you advance them a level with this, they'll still stay at 4 anger, whatever they had before. So your like mastery will still be fine in that sense. So just cool in that way, and a good way to like clear the board of drills or something like that if you need to be afraid of that kind of thing, or just decks that are trying to camp 1, or maybe a like weird camp 2 deck. You just have, it's nice to have like the little toolbox that this throw package gives you.
Yeah, so the throw package itself is about 10 to 12 cards, depending on how many specifically blue energy throws you want to play. Counting your attached card, of course, which also has throw in it. It's a very strong package, and it's one of the
Oh,
main reasons
thank
to
you.
be in
Yeah.
this deck. So okay, so playing the throw package, one thing we like to play in that throw package is drills. Now, these drills are not mandatory. They are kind of 2 different ways to build the deck. I think the drill version is much better, so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. We'll start with Blue Spec Ops drill. Most people know what this is. This is a very powerful drill. Anytime your opponent's anger is raised or lowered, they mill 2. So, you got your mastery in play. Even if your attached card's not attached, you throw a blue round throw, they mill 2. If it's successful, they mill 2 again. No matter what you decide to do with their anger, they're still milling 2 or 4 every single time you play an attack. So, obviously, this is an incredibly strong card. It's going to be great in this deck. Um, Android 18's throwing drill is a little bit of an oddball. I like to play this as kind of a one of in these strategies. When entering combat as a defender, search for a throw card. It's more the same stuff, right? It's a little bit of card advantage. It gets you another throw card. The throw cards are some of the best cards in the deck, or it can just find your attached card. You only need to use it 1 time. If you use it 1 time to get your attached card, you get your attached card stuck on there, and then you'll be in good shape. The other is Blue Biting Drill. Biting Drill is kind of awkward in this deck because a lot of times you're not going to have them at 0, so they're not actually going to be milling. But it does add +2 stages to all your attacks, and if you're in a boat where you don't have your attached card on yet or anything like that, it's pretty easy to just let your blue cards lower their anger and then lower them more with the mastery and get mill out of it that way. So like if Biting Drill's in play, you can kind of change up your game plan, your strategy a little bit to focus on putting them at 0 and kind of punishing them while they're at 0. So those are kind of the core drills for this deck. With this deck being a little bit of a drill deck, if you're in the drill package, you're going to want Blue Lunge, which we do not have on the screen, but that's obvious if you're in the drill package, and you're going to play your staple drills too, like Derek mentioned earlier, champion drill and quickness drill and things like that. One thing that we'll go ahead and mention now, because we're not going to talk about it in the blocks, because I don't think it's a core block for this deck. If you do go super heavy into drills, you can look at Tien's block as a physical option. Um, I think that there's a little bit of risk there because this deck is hungry for power stages. A lot of times you want to be able to use your MP's power level to buff your attacks too. So you're going to want different blocks, but Tien's block is an option for those kind of builds.
Speaking of blocks, he kind of segued into it pretty nice there. There's two blocks that like really make a lot of sense in this deck. Your stages are really relevant. As you continue to like push out this damage, you want to be maximizing that as well as you can. If you get to do these like extended throw combo things, like that's cool. But otherwise, you're just trying to pull off your like 2-3 good physical attacks a turn. You're not drawing a bunch of cards or anything in this deck, so you just want to hit with like a couple solid meaty attacks, and having the best power level you can uh, is going to make sense for that. That's why playing Boo or someone big makes sense too. So the two blocks that we kind of consider core to this deck are Pycon's Leg Catch, which again everyone knows. Stop an attack, raise to full, shuffle 3 cards back. Great. Getting to power up to full is really, really relevant. And having it on a block that you're going to have a few copies of is great. And then we've got a blue Overpowering Aura, one of the new cards with Endurance 3. A little bit of Endurance is welcome. Stops a physical, lowers your opponent's anger 2, which just, again, printed anger lowering, which is great for the thing you want to do. If your opponent's anger is then 0 or 1, raise your personality to its highest power stage, prevent 2 life cards of damage from your opponent's attacks. So, sort of like Biting Drill, this one is a little bit weird in that sometimes they're not going to go to 0 or 1 off of this. But just getting the physical attack and the anger manipulation is good. But sometimes you can just like say they're at 3 and you're like, well, I could put you at 5 and that's pretty cool. Or at 4, with the throw, that's pretty cool. Or I could just put you at 1 and that reduces my damage a little bit, but then I power up to full, which might be the difference between +3 or 4ing in a physical and like +1ing or something. So sometimes just powering to full off of this with just lowering their anger like a traditional anger lowering card is the right move. So it's nice to have that like option available to you. Both of these having like a chance to power you up to full on a block are just like exactly the thing you want. Nick mentioned that there are, Tien's blocks that you could do. You could do like blue leverages or something, but really like you're not going to be leveling, so that card doesn't make a lot of sense. So there's just like, if you're going to be playing your blocks, play the ones that give you stages to help you keep the beats up as high as you can. And these two just make the most sense.
Notably, blue Overpowering Aura does also transform for blue Energy Throw, which has come up in more than one game. So,
It sure does.
All right, so Derek's mentioned a couple times that this deck doesn't draw a lot of cards. So any deck that doesn't draw a lot of cards is going to lean into Dismal Future. Of course, everybody I assume knows what Dismal Future does at this point. Players can't have more than 4 cards in their hand. When a player would search, they'd search the top 6. Now, there are times where this will hurt you. So you need to be cognizant of what your matchup is. If Dismal Future does not hurt your opponent, you just don't put it into play. And that's the simple explanation. If they're not searching, if they're on generic energy beats oob or something, then they're never searching their deck. Don't put Dismal Future into play. It's a perfect card to do a final physical with or something like that. But Dismal Future hosts so many decks in this format and in every format that it's really powerful in this shell, especially because you're almost never going to get punished for it. You have like 2 cards in your deck that will punish you for it, and even so, Chokehold being successful, looking at the top 6, you're still pretty good odds to hit. So like it still could be good enough. As far as other battleground or location options, there are some you could change up based on who your MP is or things like that. But most of the time, if you're in a physical beat deck that does not draw cards, Dismal Future is going to be a good choice.
Yeah, I think this is just the flat out best option for locations in this deck, unless you're on some weird niche thing. Makes a lot of sense to have this one. Last thing I want to cover with this then is just sort of like some of the core like physicals. There are other blue physicals that exist. Nick talked about Blue Lunge, which would be perfectly welcome to be in this little segment of cards here. but we didn't include it just because you might play the version without drills. But you should have these regardless of which version you pick. Blue Knockdown, +5, power up to full. We talked about the blocks powering up to full. Having a card that does it as often as you can is great. Sledgehammer, the classic, +6, lower their anger 4, very relevant. Or it raises their anger 1 and then maybe a second one if successful, which just maximizes the damage that this can put out too. Feels very welcome and is exactly the kind of thing this deck wants to do. Same with Oops Crushing Dive. A little bit of endurance again, energy or physical focused for +3. Has some power if the rest of this isn't relevant. But you're just going to get a raise your anger, lower your opponent's anger, which can turn into raise their anger. It discards an ally in play, and then you get some power stages, which, again, just sense in a theme, I'm sure. Goes to the bottom of your deck after you, so you get it back later. Just a great core physical attack. You're probably going to have 3 copies of all these in your blue physical decks, especially in this Trunk Saga Power Throw kind of package. All of these do a ton of extra damage with the pretty consistent output that your Power Throw has, like +3, +4 per thing. You can have this hitting for like 8, 9 stages base before you, or modifier, before you even start looking at like base damage. This for 10 is pretty common. Like you can just have these attacks doing a ton of damage. Blue Round Throw with its printed +5. This little core of physicals here, if you throw them as such, are all just giant, beefy attacks that feel great with additional damage. And then using this with the throw package feels good. So you've got a really cool bit of flexibility with your physical core there too. I think that kind of covers the gist of like the core cards you're going to put in this mastery. Like every card you're going to play when you go grab your Blue Trunk Saga Mastery or your Blue Trunk Saga Cosmic Anthology Mastery, you're going to grab your power throws, and then you're probably going to grab most of all of these cards in some 3-of capacity. From there, you kind of flesh out your Power 7 stuff. You then add in any kind of like tech stuff that you might be expecting in your kind of meta. If you're thinking you're going into a heavy energy beats kind of meta, you might play different stuff. If you know more people are playing like ball decks or stall decks, you might answer that differently. And so you've got a little bit of room to kind of tweak that stuff after you core out this kind of thing. Nick, when that happens, is there any kind of things you would think of that you might put in for like situational reasons?
Sure. So, first off, this mastery, I actually do not play any anti-MPPV other than what you see on the screen because you don't need to. So that does free up a lot of your options, a lot of your extra spots. With the Oops Crushing Dive plus the blue staples, you really don't have to play a lot of anti-ally either. So you kind of sure up a couple of matchups very quickly. So then you tend to look into more of the ball control cut type decks. So you'll lean into your deceptions and your ultimatum type cards, your Hans, your fades, things like that are what I like to play in the Sensei deck. Also, one other thing this deck does not have is a lot of discard pile hate. So, you could look at that, maybe from a Sensei perspective. You could play Prep Crashes. You could play Glorio Draw Steel, Heel Kicks. There's a lot of options depending on, who your MP is and what their MP does and what direction you go with your Sensei. Because this deck has, it can play a multitude of Senseis. You can play Northkai and be aggressive. You can play Pansy for the blocks. You can play the discard pile removal. Like, you got a lot of options here of what you do. So, as long as you are cognizant of the fact that you need to answer the control decks, answer the ball type decks, and then otherwise you just need to be ready for beatdown mirrors. And so that's really all you're looking at. This deck functions great against MPPV and really well against allied decks just as a core. So you can kind of set those to the side and use your flex spots to hit more discard hate and hit you know the control shell and stuff like that, because like we've talked about several times, this is more of a standard mastery. You're going to see this mostly in standard, so you just need to be prepared for those standard decks.
Yeah, I think that addresses most of the kind of concerns you might have playing this. The little thumbnail, that you'll see on the video there is this is the best blue mastery. You gotta have that, clickbait in there. I don't know that this is the best blue mastery or anything, but this deck has really strong matchups into really strong win cons. So it's definitely like, as opposed to being the previous probable worst mastery other than, the completely unplayable World Games freestyle. Uh it's jumped into like actively meta, tier 1.5, whatever kind of thing. Like maybe not the best of the best or whatever, but with the things this deck can do and like the kind of safety net that it just sort of naturally gives you, you have a really good match with a lot of really strong decks, and you don't have to worry as much about some of the troublesome stuff that other decks have to deal with because it's just ingrained into part of what your deck just naturally does. So you just have to shore up the other things that, um, like everyone's got to kind of prepare for a beatdown or whatever. That's fine. But getting to get over the stuff that you typically have to tech real hard for in other decks as just part of your built-in strategy feels pretty good. This mastery is a ton of fun. I recommend giving it a shot. The blue power throw card that got printed has just turned it into something that's like a joy to play. If you've never dug into blue, NZ has made it absolutely the time to do so. But otherwise, I mean, that's all there is to it.
Yeah, speaking from a meta perspective, if your goal is to play this and you want to win a tournament, it is Majin Buu. That is the right choice. He is the best personality, and honestly, the main reason is because he gets to play 4 chokeholds. Chokeholds is a core part of the deck, very important. You play the chokeholds, you get to play 4 heel kicks, which again shores up one of your weaknesses. You can play 4 prep crashes if you want to. And then Boo having access to both invincibility and Cookie is incredibly strong. I think that this Majin Buu Blue Trunk Saga deck could be the best blue deck in the format. It's at least a consideration, and that's not counting things like Speedball is really a blue deck. But so if you want to play a meta deck, I think this could be your meta deck. This is a very strong deck. I'm very comfortable. I would be comfortable listing this in Worlds as my Worlds deck. So that's high praise from somebody who wants to win. So it's definitely worth giving a shot to. I know most people have never tried it. They look at it like, oh, this used to be the joke Dragon's Victory deck. That is not what this is. This is a beatdown deck. It is very good at it. It is very good at interacting with the board. You're not playing red where you're stuck on one thing that can interact with the board. Like this deck interacts. It interacts really well, and it does a good job of keeping the board clear.
And if you're degenerate, you can throw a Dragon's Victory in there.
You absolutely can.
All right, guys, that is episode 3 of Perfect Score. Stay tuned for episode 4, where we dig into another mastery and another deck core. Adios.